Hello, Carl.
What the hell goes on here?
How you doing? Well, I just thought I'd come out and talk to you for a couple minutes.
Oh, you brought a chair too?
Yeah, I brought a chair out here.
Well, good.
We're out in the garage here in Castle Pines, Colorado, because Carl's not allowed to smoke in the house, I think is right.
That's right.
So you spend a lot of time in garages smoking.
Well, I spend some time in mine and I spend some time in yours.
Right. So hey, Carl, would you take a few minutes here and tell me the story of your life? Starting with where are your folks from, and where were you born, and where'd you grow up, and how'd you wind up here 80 some years later in Colorado?
Well, that's a good question. Now let's see. My mother was born in Plymouth, Vermont in 1898, February 22nd. My father was born in Shrewsbury, Vermont in 1886 in the old Pratt farmhouse, where 5 of his siblings were born in the same bed.
Was that a working farm?
Oh yes, that was a working farm.
Yeah.
160 acres, a cow farm. Up and scratching, living out of Vermont, where there's about 4 inches of soil and untold rocks. They always figured you'd have 2 good crops each year in Vermont. One was snow and the other was rocks in the spring, because the frost would pop them right up out of the ground.
Yeah. So did you work on the farm?
Well, I left the farm when I was 8. I mean, we moved off the farm when I was 8, so I didn't do an awful lot of work, but I had chores to do.
Yeah.
Wood box to fill and chickens to feed and carry milk from the barn down to the house. My father is told that when I was 3 years old, we had, back in those days, you bought lard in tin pails, silver leaf lard in a 5-pound pail. And one pail would go us through 2 meals. So in the morning, for breakfast, I'd bring at 3 years old, I'd carry a pail of milk from the barn to the house, which was probably 150 yards. And Dad tells that...
and everybody have that for breakfast?
Yeah, we had that on cereal for breakfast.
Yeah.
And we always had a big breakfast.
Yeah.
My mother and the maid baked 6 pies every day.
Yeah.
We had pie for breakfast, pie for lunch, dinner at noon. The big meal was always at noon.
Yeah.
And then a pretty hefty meal at night.
Yeah.
Because, well...
Because you're hungry after working on the farm all
life,
day.
The chores at the barn started about 5 in the morning.
Yeah.
Cleaning it up the barn a little and then milking.
Yeah.
And
all that stuff. Were you close to your parents? Did you have a good relationship with them?
Oh yes.
Yeah. Both of them?
Both of them.
Yeah.
Mother used to whomp the hell out of me, but...
Yeah. Did you deserve it?
Mainly because I had it coming. She'd tell me to do something, and I say I won't, and whomp!
Yeah, well, the apple doesn't fall very far from the tree, does it?
No.
Some kids are like too, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we'll get to them later,
They got whomped, too.
Let's go back to this 8 years old leaving the farm.
Farm, a one-man dairy farm, and that's what it boiled down to. There wasn't enough profit in there to have a hired man all the time.
Yeah.
And hired men usually got $1 a day and found. And it got to where there wasn't enough income to
keep the
support
farm.
life.
Yeah.
I know 1926, no, 24, Dad bought a Model T pickup truck, $319.
Which was quite a bit at the time.
Well, yeah, I mean, when your income is probably not more than $1.25 a day,
Yeah.
for family.
That's a
His
year's
family
worth.
was growing.
Yeah.
Because Jane and Mary Ann was born in 27. She was the youngest. And
So there are 5 of you?
no, there were 4 of us.
4 of you.
I'm the oldest, thank God. I never lived through it if I hadn't been.
And the rest of them are all girls.
Yeah, the rest of them are all girls.
That would be Jane, Zoe,
No,
and Mary Ann?
Zoa,
Zoa.
Jane, and then Mary Ann.
Uh-huh.
And they sold the farm. And for $3,600. 2 years later, took it back because the guy couldn't keep up the payments. And I guess we had it for another 2 years, and then they sold it to a local fella that didn't know a damn thing but work. And he made enough go of it to pay off the mortgage.
Yeah. So meanwhile, you're going to school.
Yeah, I went to school. I went to school in the 1st grade. I lived with Aunt Zoa Fletcher down in Ludlow.
Uh-huh.
And they had a hell of a political hassle over that because I was from the town of Shrewsbury, and they had schools there. And the town of Ludlow tried to collect from the town of Shrewsbury for educating me in the 1st grade.
Yeah.
And Aunt Zoa went to the Board of Selectmen and said, hey, I've been paying taxes in this town for a long time. I guess if I'm going to want to have a nephew come and live with me, he can go to school here. And that was the end of that.
And you did.
Yeah.
So you went to school continuously from then through graduating from high school, right?
No.
Yeah?
No, well, on October 27th in 1927, we had one hell of a flood. It took out everything in Vermont, every bridge, all the roads. Of course, the roads ran along the rivers because that's where the good grade was, and took them all out. And we moved down to the village of Cuttingsville and rented a house. Big deal. Big house, 6 bedrooms, I guess there was. So each of us kids had a bedroom, and Dad and Mother had a bedroom. And there was one spare. It wasn't very big, but it was a bedroom. And in the 2nd grade I started down at Ludlow, and then along came the flood in 27. And I remember Dad drove the Model T down, but he had to walk the railroad back the next day because that was the only thing above water. And the only thing didn't get washed out, the railroads didn't get washed out. And my father was absolutely petrified of heights. And there were several places where he had to walk across trestles. And he told us afterwards, he said he was scared absolutely out of his wits walking across those trestles.
Well, it sounds pretty scary. Yeah.
And then we moved down the village, and there was a school there in the village. Although after the flood, schools opened up in Shrewsbury, and I lived at the farm and walked to Shrewsbury Center, which is 3.5 miles, over in the morning and back at night. And the last 1/4 mile home at night was through a grove of yellow birch, big yellow birch. And any little breeze and these things would rub together and squeak and squawk and make all kinds of weird sounds. And I used to walk with my eyes right straight ahead because I didn't want to see what was making those sounds over in the woods.
Yeah.
And we had quite a lot of wildlife around there. I remember one night I knew something was following me, but I didn't turn around to look. Next morning, Dad was down and looking at it in the snow. There was a bobcat tailing, walking along behind me.
Yeah.
Well, they wouldn't have done anything. Hell,
Yeah.
wasn't worried about it.
So then in high school, finally, is where you met your future bride, I think, right?
Yeah.
And you were back in Ludlow at that point?
Yeah, when got through grade school in Shrewsbury, top of the town. Of course, Rutland was closer, and most all the kids went to Rutland High School. But I didn't like the Rutland High School sports politics, so I went to Ludlow, Black River Academy, same damn building that Cal Coolidge graduated from. And it's still standing now as a national museum. But, oh, I had 4 years of fun in high school.
Yeah, dated lots of different girls?
Well, of course, going back to Ludlow as a freshman, I ran into all my first grade buddies.
Uh-huh.
Most of them were in the class, so I wasn't walking into a bunch of real strangers.
Mm-hmm.
I had a lot of fun. But the way I met Mary, there was intramural basketball tournament. And as a freshman, I was kind of manager of the girls' basketball team. And I sold tickets to the tournament and so forth. And I went up early the day of the games, and I kind of laid across 6 seats, reserved them. And I had figured on, I'll get Barbara Walker to sit right side of me, because I knew her, I liked her quite a lot. And, but Bobby sat someplace else. This little Mary Thomas sat side of me. Well, that's okay.
I think she sat there on purpose?
I don't know how the hell the seating worked out, but anyhow, Mary sat side of me. And, of course, we talked a little bit. Then we went down to Simon's and Wright's and had ice cream. They loved to see me eat ice cream. I don't know what it was about it, but that whole damn class of mine, just watch me eat ice cream.
Really?
I have a 10-cent pineapple sundae. 10-cent scoop. Now that was a pretty good scoop of ice cream. With pineapple on it and a little whipped cream on top of that. And I could get it down in 3 bites.
So this impressed Mary,
Oh,
I guess.
I did impress somebody. Of course, Mary was a senior.
Yeah.
And
you were a junior?
No. My freshman year, Mary was a junior. And
so you were a sophomore?
I was a freshman.
Yeah, okay.
She was 2 years ahead of me. And, I don't know, one thing led to another. And, she was working at the library, that was it. I was living with my aunt and uncle, Maggie and Clarence Davis, in the south end of town. Mary lived on the northwest end of town, and the library was about in the middle. So I used to, there'd be a bunch of us, walk her home at night, and then we'd drop off the other girls on the way back down. And
so you married her and moved to Detroit, I understand.
oh, Jesus. Yeah, eventually we got married.
Did you propose to her at some point?
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah?
Yeah, and then we went right to Rutland and bought a ring on time. I guess I paid for it.
Did you get a ring?
No, I bought her a ring.
Yeah.
And of course, the Pratt name was pretty well known in Rutland. We can get credit most anywhere. Seems to me we put $50 down on that ring.
Yeah.
And then I think I paid it off, and in about 6 months with 2 more $50 payments. No interest.
Yeah. Did you have a job or anything at that time?
Oh, hell, yeah, before we were married, I was working in Detroit.
Oh, okay, that was before you got married.
Yeah.
So what was the job and what was your career?
Well, in 1940, a bunch of us went skiing one Sunday. And I had some brand new skis, steel edges, first time I've ever used steel edges. And I got them crossed behind me, and I took one hell of a spill, and I tore an ankle all up. That was on Sunday. I gimped around the house for 3-4 days, and come Friday, Mother says, Carl, you go down to Springfield and get a job. Well, I didn't want to work in any stinking damn old machine shop. But Mother ruled the roost, and I went to Springfield, and I went to Bryant. There were 3 shops in town. I went to Bryant because I knew that sitting right inside the front door was Steve Martin, who was from Cuttingsville, I've known all my life. And I walked in, and Steve says, of course, my nickname all through my life in Cuttingsville was Pin. And today, I can go back to Cuttingsville, and the old timers who are now my age know me as Pin.
Where does Pin come from? What's the story?
I don't know.
Okay, just Pin.
Yeah, Pin. It started out, I was turning cartwheels somewhere when I was real little, and one of the guys there started calling me Pinwheel.
Okay, and it just stuck.
Dropped the pin.
Yeah.
And
so you go into Cuttingsville looking for a job on orders from your mom.
no, I went to Springfield.
Springfield, sorry.
And walked in the door, and Steve says, well, hi, Pin, what are you doing here? I said, I'm looking for a job, Steve. Well, he says, just a minute, I'll get you a fella to talk to. And he disappeared, and in about 3 minutes he came back with a little weazened up old pipsqueak of a guy, George Lynch. He was, I guess, personnel manager at the time. And George shook hands and glad to know, was glad to see me and so forth and so on. Do you mind doing hard, dirty work? I said, nope. He says, you mind working for a crab? And I said, nope. Well, he says, sit here a minute. And he disappeared out into the shop. A few minutes later, he came back with a red-headed Irishman, about 6'3", probably weighed 250. He was in pretty good shape. His name was Ralph Farr. He was foreman of the turret lathe department. And Ralph says, do you mind doing hard, dirty work? And I said, no. And he says, come in Monday morning, 6:55. So that was my job interview.
Yeah.
Many years later, after Excello had bought Bryant, I got a letter from the Excello personnel department, and enclosed with it was a job application form, because my jacket, my file jacket, didn't show any job application that I ever applied for a job. So I filled it out.
So you were a machinist, basically, right?
Well, yeah, that's
machine salesman, machine repair, heavy machinery.
Heavy machinery.
And your entire career was with that company.
Right.
How long was that career?
42 and a half years, almost to the day. I went to work the 29th of January, and my retirement date was July 31st.
On what year?
82.
Uh-huh. And that time was all with Bryant.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Well, of course, a couple of years in the Army.
So you've only had one job other than the Army.
Right. Yeah. But that one job entailed a lot of jobs.
Yeah.
But actually, it was a case of, I was a troubleshooter.
Yeah.
For 25 years.
Yeah.
I worked at the shop a year and a half. And Joe Johnson, the general manager, called me in the office one day, or one evening, we were working 7 to 7. About 5:30, he called me in, and Joe says, sit down, Carl, have a cigarette. So I grabbed a cigarette. And of course, I worked, and I had a pair of black cotton work pants and a black cotton work shirt that I'd cut the sleeves off, and wore an old baseball cap. I hadn't shaved in over a week, and I was pretty grubby looking, because we'd been grinding cast iron all day, and that's awful dirty stuff. And Joe says, "Carl, we got a problem in Detroit." He says, "One of the servicemen out there has forgot to wash his feet, and he's got athlete's foot so bad he can't walk." He said, "We need help out there." He said, "Could you be in Detroit Monday morning?"
Permanently?
No, he says, "Just could you be in Detroit Monday morning?" And I said, "Joe, I don't know, I got no clothes. This is my clothes." And I said, "I need a day." I said, "I take off tomorrow. I'll get a suit made up in Rutland, and then I guess I could go." I said, "No, I'd better make it Tuesday." So we could, okay, so I took the Saturday off. We've been working 7 to 7, 7 days a week. You had to check with, Wednesday was payday, and that was really the only day you knew what hell day it was. 7 to 7, 7 days a week. And so Dad had come into work. He was working the other shift. He was working nights. And he'd come into work. And we were driving the same car back and forth. So he'd come in and give me the keys and tell me where it was. And this day ran right out. And I said, "You know something? I was just in Joe Johnson's office, and he asked me if I could go to Detroit, be in Detroit Monday." Well, Dad said, "What for?" And I says, "Oh, they got trouble out there, the service people, and need more help." So I told him that, I told Joe that I could be there Tuesday, not Monday. I said I'd go to Rutland Saturday and get a suit, and push him a little bit and have it tailored. And
So that's how you became a salesman?
that's how I became a serviceman.
Serviceman. Well, you had that customer contact.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The first job I had was
And then that turned into a permanent thing in Detroit.
till I went in the service.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
So was that a good career for you?
as far as I'm concerned, yes.
Yeah. You did lots of different things related to those machines.
Well, like Christ, I could rip one down on the ground and put it back together and make it work.
Yeah, and you learned all that on the line in the shop.
Mostly out on the road,
Yeah.
because in the shop they had people to do these things.
Yeah.
The machine broke down, somebody came out and fixed it, some of the maintenance guys.
Yeah.
But it put me out on the road, and I don't know, wrenches just seemed to fit my hands.
Yeah. Good. So you spent a lot of time traveling.
Yeah.
Both on service and sales.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me about your family.
My family?
Yeah, your family. You got a wife and 3 kids.
Well,
Where did they come from? And what are they
that's
like?
a good question.
Yeah.
Well, let's see.
Mary, you met in Ludlow.
Mary, I met in Ludlow. We were married in Pittsfield, Vermont,
Yeah. What year? When? What date?
September 3rd, 1942.
Good. Well, you both agree on that.
Yeah.
So it'll be your 60th anniversary this coming September.
September.
All right. Yeah.
And
And what's your relationship with Mary been like all these years? You guys have been together a long time.
yeah, we've been together a long time. We've had our ups and downs.
Yeah. What's she like? Tell me about Mary.
Well, she's pretty damn mild-mannered to put up with me all these years. And getting now to where she's getting to be an old lady. And some of the things she used to put up with, she don't condone anymore.
Yeah.
Such as smoking.
Yeah. Well, have a cigarette.
I'm going to,
All right.
if I can get to them.
Yeah.
No, I'd say we've had a pretty decent relationship.
Yeah. Did you guys both want kids right out of the gate?
Nobody said anything about kids before we got married.
Yeah.
All of a sudden she was pregnant.
Yeah. That would be Carl the Third.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So he was born in Detroit?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
He was born in Detroit, and he's in the Detroit area today.
Yeah.
And I got hauled into the service and went over and beat hell out of Hitler's gang. And came home and went to work for my uncle, helping him make maple syrup that spring.
Yeah. Well, we were talking about your family. I want to take you back to your family. Tell me about Carl. What kind of kid was he? And
oh, he was a normal boy.
Yeah.
Had to be knocked down once in a while.
Yeah. Was he energetic, rambunctious?
Uh-huh.
From the get-go?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. He had a tough start. He was in the hospital for 30 days after he was born.
Really? And you were out of town, right?
Well, this was in Detroit. I was working shops in Detroit, but I was gone every day.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Yeah. And then a couple of years later, on the same date.
3 years later, on the same date, Brian was born. Carl was 2 weeks late. Brian was a week early.
Yeah.
They were born on the same day. Carl, when Mary went to the hospital, of course I was in Chicago at the time, and she called me about 1 o'clock in the morning and said that Freddie, her cousin, was taking her at the hospital. And I said, well, okay, I had kind of a rough day, but I'll start about 5 o'clock in the morning and drive in. And so 5 o'clock the next morning, I'm on the road. 5 hours later, I was in Cleveland, which is a pretty long drive from Detroit in those days. I had a 39 Ford. It would go like hell. It was a little on the rough side. And 5 hours to Cleveland. Cleveland to Buffalo is 200 miles, and that took me 8 hours. And from Buffalo east, well, I pulled into a little diner in Auburn, New York, about 2 in the morning. This is after driving all the previous day. 2 o'clock in the morning, I pulled into this diner, and I pulled right in between 2 New York State police cars. And the windows in the diner were clear enough, so car pulled in. Of course, my headlights shone right in the windows. I shut them off and came in, and they looked out and saw the license plate on the front of the car. And I sat down and ordered a coffee and a couple donuts. And they said, where'd you come from? I said, Chicago. Well, he said, the road between here and Depew has been closed since 9 o'clock. And I said, well, that's evidently why I didn't see any traffic.
Yeah, that'll do it. Well, I hope Brian appreciates all the trouble you went to be there for his arrival.
I stopped 2 or 3 times and called the hospital, and they wouldn't tell me anything. No baby yet, anyway.
Yeah.
No, I just kept coming.
Yeah.
And I got home about, well, I pulled into Cuttingsville, folks, because it had to come through that way. That's the way I drove through. And Mother says, you have a son. And I said, good. I said, give me a cup of coffee and something to eat, and I'll go down to Springfield and see him. So I did.
Yeah, and what's he like?
Well, he was pink. And of course, both the boys had stomach trouble when they were little. They couldn't hold down liquids. So the next day after Brian was born, they were feeding him gruel with a spoon.
Really?
Yeah. Let's see, what the hell was it? Something, it wasn't oatmeal, but it was something like oatmeal.
Yeah, get him right to solid food.
Right on to solid food. Of course, poor little cuss, his belly never got full, but he grew like hell.
Yeah.
And so he was pretty fussy all the time. Carl was always fussy.
Both of them were.
Yeah.
Yeah. So did they get along well with each other?
Oh yeah, the kids, they always got along pretty good. I don't know if they ever had a real fight.
Yeah.
I don't know that they ever had a real fight.
So Carl didn't mind having a little brother?
No,
Yeah. How'd they feel about Mary coming along?
Well, then Mary pregnant again several years later, and the boys are discussing it. Carl made the statement they didn't want any girls. They didn't want a bunch of dollies around.
But another little brother would have been okay.
Well, they didn't say that, but they said they didn't want a sister.
Yeah.
They didn't have a hell of a lot of choice.
Yeah. Well, tell me one story about each one of the kids that's most characteristic about them, that kind of sums up what they're like. Any age.
Well, the one that I think about was Brian, that comes to mind real quick. When Carl was about 15, he picked up an old Model A Roadster for almost nothing, and we decided to rebuild it. And Brian wanted an Italian racing bike, so he saved up some money. We always split with the kids. You save up half, and we would get the other half. I don't know how we did it. So Brian had 160 bucks in that Italian racing bike. And we had Carl's car on the road running before we had 150 in it. I mean, that was stripping it right down and rebuilding the engine and everything.
Yeah.
And at the time, we didn't have a second car. So after we got it running and registered, Mary used to drive it down to the market shopping.
Yeah.
And the bag boys at Ralph's, which was the big store, they'd all fight to carry her groceries up. See that little old lady?
Yeah.
In a Model A Roadster.
And that was your only car?
No, well, I had a car.
Yeah.
I had to have a car.
Okay. So that was Brian's story. What does that tell you about Brian?
Well, Brian got 160 bucks in that bike, and one day he'd ride it to school. We lived right at the top, the top of a long hill. And Brian had it timed so he'd start out the top of that hill when the light down on the bottom was a certain color, so that he wouldn't have to stop.
Ah.
Jesus, he'd go through that light at 40 miles an hour. Yeah, he never had any bad spills, but he had a lot of trouble with puncture weeds.
Yeah, so he was an adventurer and a planner.
Yeah, and Carl got his license. We had to get Mary another car.
Yeah.
But that Model A was, I wish to hell we still had it.
Yeah.
It was beat up. Oh man, it was chewed up. We used more Bondo, and I did more grinding.
Yeah, well, you guys have always been mechanical, right? You take care of your own cars, and the boys do that too, right?
Yeah.
So tell me.
Not now. They don't.
Not anymore? Well, Carl's in the automobile business, right?
Yeah, but not in the engine business.
Ah.
He was an assembly guy.
Ah.
He could make them go together.
So tell me a story about Carl.
Well, let's see. Oh, the story about Brian was that he stopped at Ralph's one night on the way home from school, went in to buy an ice cream bar, and when he came out, there was a kid standing there looking his bicycle over pretty good. Brian didn't say a word. He walked up and whacked that guy in the belly and jumped on the bike and rode away.
Is that right?
The kid's laying in
Is that how he usually dealt with stuff?
Well, that's the one time that I know of.
Yeah.
Brian said, I handed him one right in that gut.
Did he come right home and tell you that story?
No, about a month later, I guess we found out.
Yeah.
But that Carl, I think the best one I know of Carl was let's see, when would it have been? All along about his junior year, he went to work in a shop out there in the summer. And pretty good job. And one night, I got home from work about 5 o'clock. Carl had the back end of the Model A picked up with a chain fall. And he had the rear end out. He'd blown the second gear that day. But he'd stopped at a junkyard on the way home and picked up another second gear. And he was under the car working up a storm, taking the transmission out because he had to pull it all apart to put a new second gear in. Not a new one, a junk one. It cost about $2 at the time. I guess probably today, a used second gear from Model A would cost you $20 anyway. But asked him what happened. Well, he said, I blew second gear. But he said, I got another one. And he said, I said, what's your hurry? He said, I got a date with Sherry tonight at 7 o'clock. And here it is, 5 o'clock, and he's got the transmission laying on the floor.
Yeah.
And he worked right through supper.
And made it?
Washed his hands, and he picked up Sherry at 7 o'clock.
All right.
But Carl was a lot more mechanical than Brian, although Brian today can do a pretty good job, except his belly's so big he couldn't get under a Model A now.
Okay, well that leaves Mary, the girl.
Yeah, well, Mary came along and she was an obstinate little brat. I think she got more spankings than the boys did. Because you ask her to do anything, and if she didn't want to, no! Jesus, cross my lap and whap, whap, whap. She didn't cry very much. But she used to get mad.
Yeah?
I was trying to think of some story of Mary.
Take your time, it'll come to you.
But she grew pretty fast.
Yeah? How'd she get along with the boys?
Oh, hell, after she was 3 years old, running around, no problem.
Yeah.
Then we moved to California. A couple of years later, we put in the swimming pool. And we kind of had to yap at the boys a little bit about, don't be too rough with Mary in the pool. Well, before that summer was over, Mary could outswim either one of them. And they had a lot of fun in that swimming pool. You couldn't swim in it very far, it wasn't that big.
Yeah.
But it was a good play pool.
And the boys used to babysit for Mary, I guess.
Yeah.
You were telling me.
Oh, yeah. When we were bowling in an early league in California, and we had to be up to bowling alley at 6. But we'd have an early dinner, and there were programs on the TV that Mary had a program she wanted to watch, and I think that came on at 6 o'clock and lasted for a half hour. And the orders were, the boys are babysitting her. Mary is to watch her program. Well, they were watching something before that, and they watched the program after that. And we found out many months later, I guess probably a year or so later, that Brian would turn on his program and then pull the knobs off the TV so that Mary couldn't turn her program on.
Oh, I'm surprised she didn't rat on him.
But she never told on him. Brian, I think, was the one that told us about it years later.
Yeah. So what careers did all three of those guys go in? Do you think they picked good careers for each one of them?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the kid going to school today, he got no idea in hell what he wants to do. And by the time you get through high school, you still don't know what you want to do. I've always thought that 2 years in the service right out of high school would do a lot for this country. it would give the kids a chance to see a little life out on the other side.
And that's what Brian did, right?
No, Brian went through school, and we were moving back to Indiana, and we moved back to Indiana, the two Marys and I. And Brian stayed out there. He was senior in high school, captain of the football team. His class was the first to graduate from that school in La Cañada. And so we left him out there staying with friends. Carl at the time, of course, was in college at the San Diego State. And we left him there. And I think the hardest thing I ever did, and it still chokes me up when I think that we left La Cañada and left the boys there. That hurt. But it turned out pretty good. But none of the kids, I don't think any of our kids had any idea what they really wanted to do until after they got out of college. Now Carl graduated from San Diego State. Sherry got married. And Carl went to City College in Pasadena. And Sherry graduated a year behind him from high school. She was going down to University of California in San Diego. And so Carl, after 2 years or a year at Pasadena City College, transferred to San Diego State, so he'd be in the same town as Sherry anyway. And he get down to San Diego State, and they didn't accept any of his Pasadena City College credits. We had to dig in a little. But after graduation, he and Sherry got married, and they went up north in California because Sherry was going to take a year more of college for teacher's credit. Her grandmother absolutely insisted that she have credits so that she could teach if necessary. So she took an extra year at Stanford and got her teacher's credentials. And they found an apartment. And John McLean, Sherry's father, and I loaded up a trailer, hooked it to the back of John's T-Bird, and Mary and I drove it up to the apartment so the kids would have something to sleep on. This was just a rug, but the next day after they got there, Carl went to the Ford Motor Company, Ford Motor Plant in south of Mountain View. I can't think of the name of it. And walked in and asked to see the personnel manager. No, guy saw him, I don't know why. And Carl explained that he was looking for a job, and his teacher at San Diego State, he took a time study course, and the teacher knew this guy up at Ford. So Carl called, asked for him, went in to see him, and he filled out his job application on the guy's desk. 2 days later, which was on a Friday, he was an employee of Ford Motor.
And he worked there his entire career.
Yeah,
Sounds kind of similar to your career story.
Well, he had a couple of years out for the service.
Like you.
Yeah. Well, he didn't get into the shooting scrape. He was over in Germany at peacetime.
Yeah. And his job jacket did have an application in it.
Yeah.
Unlike yours.
Unlike mine, there was an application.
Yeah. So what career did Brian following? How did he get into his tracks?
Well, Brian went to Purdue. He was on the football squad that went to the Rose Bowl in, what the hell year would that have been? 60. Well, in the 60s anyway, when Purdue went to the Rose Bowl. So we went out. Of course, the Rose Bowl was about less than a mile from where we lived there in La Cañada. I mean, I went by it every day going to work. Very unimpressive. You can't see only, I guess maybe there's 30 feet in the air. It's all below ground. And he wasn't on the dress squad. He was just fodder. But he got to go to the Rose Bowl with the Purdue team. And at the time he was going with the Purdue Golden Girl, the #1 twirler band. Oh, she was a cutie. You looked down on the field and boy, there was nothing but legs. And you come to see her, she was 5'2", a little bitty damn thing. But yeah, they won the ball game.
And that led to his career in?
Nah.
No.
No.
Yeah. Well, what was Brian's career?
Well, Brian, let's see. Oh, after he busted out of Purdue in the middle of his junior year, he went to OCS and graduated from OCS as a second lieutenant and went to Germany with an armored outfit and did pretty well with them. And then he got out and he was driving trucks for an outfit in Boston. They hauled or drove rental cars back to the original spot. And he was without a job. He ski bummed one winter. And once a month he had to go to, I think, somewhere outside of Boston for unemployment. Pick up an unemployment check, and that's when Jane heard about that, she decided that they could find something for him at Country Curtains. So he went to work at Country Curtains. Yes, Mother.
She's gone. She'll be back.
And he's been with Country Curtains ever since.
Ah, so another one company career.
Yeah.
And Mary.
Well, I couldn't tell you Mary's career. Jesus, she's had more jobs, and every time she changed jobs, oh man, she's taking a chance.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But it worked out pretty well.
It worked out pretty well. Worked out well.
Yeah.
Evidently, she got more on the ball than I gave her credit for.
Yeah. What is her career? What does she do?
She's a peddler. Back when I was working, you used to call him sales manager. Now it's VP marketing. And they evidently pay good for those 2 letters, VP.
Yeah.
But Carl got to be a superintendent of assembly of all the Ford 4-wheel drive stuff and pickup trucks. And Brian is VP of the warehouse for Country Curtains. Mary is VP marketing for EchoStar. I got a bunch of VPs in the outfit.
All right, good deal. So what now? You've been living in Stockbridge for 19 years.
You know something? I wish the hell you'd forget that we lived Stockbridge.
It's the Red Lion thing.
Stockbridge.
You live in Egremont.
We live in Egremont.
South Egremont.
South Egremont.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And you go to the Gaslight Bar and Grill every morning, don't you?
Gaslight Cafe.
Yeah.
Yep. Every day that it's open, I do show up sometime during the day.
Yeah. So you got a routine going back there in South Egremont, near Stockbridge.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. 13 miles.
Yeah. So good. So what next? What's the next event you're looking forward to?
Well, I'm not looking forward to it. It's one that you don't look back on.
Yeah.
And that's about my next event.
Yeah. Well, it's been a pretty good life, though, don't you think?
Yes, I have no complaints. I've done as I wanted to do about all my life.
Good. Do you have any advice for the people watching this film in the years to come?
No, other than keep your nose clean and don't be afraid to work at it.
All right. Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you, Carl. It's a pleasure having you for my new father-in-law.
Well, you're a welcome addition to the family.
Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Oh, yes. Same to you, Joe.